about sort of getting over the self-criticism. I'm curious, I think it would be helpful for anyone to kind of hear how, if you've gotten over that, how you have, or sort of how maybe you see your, like your career growing or changing, but your ideas about writing and your ideas about being yourself while you're writing. And sort of getting away from getting stuck. Right? I mean, you've had how many books have you written, and how long would you say your writing career has been? And how have you made it? How have you made it this far? Is the question. Yeah.
Nothing I've written was harder than my first book, and my first book was never published. So I remember I was sitting at a window, I had my laptop in front of me, just like blinking cursor, page 1. And I had a book of Catherine Ann Porter stories right by the computer. And I was thinking, like, if I ever get stuck, I'll just see how Catherine did it. And that was the worst idea ever, because like you get stuck, you're like, oh, I'm no good, like this is crappy. And then you go and you see how Catherine Ann Porter wrote. And then it just puts you even further in the hole of like self-doubt. So that was a bad idea. And I didn't do that anymore. I think it only, not to sound like a PSA, but it only gets better. Like all the demons become very familiar, and they're huge sky-filling demons at the beginning, and then they become like house demons towards the end. Like you're just used to them. So you recognize, oh, this old thing is coming back. Like I'm just going to put that away to one side. So I've written 9 books, I think. And because a lot of them are sort of for hire, younger reader books, so it's hard to. I have certain books that I feel like I'm fully like capital A author of, and then some that I'm not. But I think in the beginning, especially, avoiding paralysis and avoiding getting blocked would be about recognizing what brought me to writing in the first place. I think all writers in some ways have a mixture of like a God complex and then a big set of insecurities as well. Because if you didn't have sort of the feeling that my viewpoint is worthy of being written down and read, then you wouldn't be doing it anyway. And what gets in the way is the fear that you could be wrong about that. And I think I let, those are both totally equally valid parts of the writing process, but I let the God complex one, the arrogant side, do the first draft by himself. And just like, I'm awesome. And then I go back and let the other insecure one take over when I'm editing. And just thinking like, oh, what would David Grand say about that? Or like, what would, my friend Rebecca say about that? And then that one it's a much better editor. But it couldn't be the creator, because if you were the worried one and you were trying to create, you would just feel really stuck or just feel bad about yourself. So I think they're both important, but they can't be in the room at the same time. So you let one take over for a while, and then you let the other one take over. But we all have them, I think. And if you didn't, then you probably wouldn't be writing that well. Either if you only had the worried, insecure one, you would never write your first draft. If you only had the first one, you'd just write crappy, self-indulgent work.
So can I ask you about your failed or your grim second novel?
Sure.
Is that okay? Yeah,
of course. It's called The New Kid.
Maybe there'll be a resurgence.
Maybe. There's certainly plenty of stock in the publisher's warehouse. The review that called my second novel grim also had one of the best quotes from any review I've gotten, which was, "It's a perverted Richie Rich." So it was both. I've been a huge fan of Patricia Highsmith for decades, I guess I can say now, and I love her mixture of elegant prose, really dark sensibilities, tense scenes. I just think it all comes together and kind of this homoerotic underlying pull to everything. And I really loved all of that about her work. And so The New Kid was my reaction against my kind of commercial sugar-coated first book. And so I wrote about a teenager, actually, in suburban Florida, which is where I grew up, who falls in love with a straight boy who's tough and ends up beating up the main character after he hooks up with him, like out of homosexual panic. And then there's another plot line of his sister who's been in Rome trying to like get back into her ex-boyfriend's life. And then the two storylines converge halfway through. I really liked the book. I haven't looked at it because I'm scared to. I'm scared that I'll hate it. And so at the time I thought it was good. It's more the reception that was the hard part about it, not that I felt like I made a failed book. I think it's a weird book, and I think it's hard to place and hard to take, and it made me realize that it's not dumb to think about what readers are ready for, and not, instead of just what's the best book.
I wanted to ask whether or not you thought that the book was either not ready, or what was the question that I asked? Whether you thought that the market wasn't ready for sort of open for it, or that it was just the wrong time, and maybe a book like that would do great now.
I'm very glad that I don't have to figure out if the book was ready for the market or not, since it's done. Like, I feel like otherwise I would just be looking backwards. To me is horrifying. And looking forwards is actually kind of pleasing. And I think there's certain temperaments that are the exact opposite. That the future is overwhelming, and so you sort of nurse the past. I've got the opposite one, just because I can't do anything about it, so it doesn't feel particularly useful to worry about it. That said, I don't think it was that the book came out at the wrong time. I think probably there was something that I wasn't doing in the book that I thought I was. You can control as many variables as you're aware of, but part of a writing career is getting aware of more variables that you hadn't even thought about, so things that you're not even aware of, the idea of tension didn't enter into my writing process for years after I started writing. The idea of where's the tension in a scene, or what is the driving force as far as tension. I just wasn't thinking about it. And so some of my scenes were probably intuitively tense, and some weren't. But I hadn't gone back and judged the ones that weren't in those terms. I just hadn't ever considered it. And so I think that's an example of how the toolkit expands as you work longer and you think more about writing and you read more great books. It kind of shifts you. So I know my toolkit was smaller with that book. So I can only assume that there was something that didn't work there. And it's why I do read reviews from trade reviews to newspapers to reader reviews, just because there's something that brought every reviewer to the place that they are. So even if it's a 1-star, I hated this book review, it's potentially useful. You don't know what brought the reader there, and it could be totally personal things that are outside of your book. But there is... So take, for example, a review that says, I found this book so boring, with 4 O's. That's it. You could dismiss it. You could not look at it. Or you could think, I had 4 reviews that said this is so boring. I'm going to assume those aren't actually people that should be reading this book in order to just keep going and to think I create worthwhile things. But you can think I had no people say this book went way too fast and I just wanted to spend more time. So of all those 1-star reviews that I'm kind of like taking with a grain of salt, because who knows, this could be like a struggling 4th grader with dyslexia who was given a book that was too advanced, and so it's not that my book was boring. But if you think that the sort of the general weight of the reviews were towards that, it's useful information. You can disregard it, but it's like a data point as you're writing books. Because I think it's the moment you stop thinking about writing as a growth process, as a way of getting better, is probably the moment that your books won't get better. And I think I can't think of a author or books that couldn't improve somehow. So that's why I like reading them. My first couple of books, reviews were painful, but now I think once the quantity gets bigger, any single review doesn't carry as much weight because there's something else going on.